The moment Mason stumbled through my front door with that familiar swagger and whiskey-glazed eyes, I knew my carefully constructed world was about to crumble. But I never imagined it would happen so spectacularly, so publicly, with my husband Owen holding a birthday cake and 20 of our closest friends and family watching. I'm Eirene Vellum, 33 years old, and until that moment, I thought I had everything under control. My marriage to Owen, my Tuesday afternoon errands, my reputation as the perfect suburban wife and mother. I'd been juggling my double life for 8 months, sneaking away to Mason's apartment while Owen taught his middle school math classes, and our 8-year-old daughter Tessa was at school. The living room was decorated with silver and gold balloons, streamers hanging from the ceiling fan, and a chocolate cake with 33 candles waiting on the dining table. Owen had planned everything perfectly, just like he always did. Steady, reliable Owen, with his pressed khakis and careful smile, making sure everyone had drinks and appetizers, while I played the gracious hostess. My mother-in-law Lorraine sat in the corner armchair, her sharp eyes missing nothing as usual. At 64, she had the kind of intuition that made me nervous, always watching, always calculating. Owen's sister Gwen was helping in the kitchen, trying to keep the peace as she always did, while my own mother Cora fussed over the gift table, rearranging bows and cards with theatrical precision. Tessa clung to Owen's side, her small hand gripping his shirt. She'd been quieter lately, more withdrawn, but I told myself it was just a phase. Kids go through phases. It had nothing to do with my Tuesday absences or the late-night phone calls I'd been taking in the bathroom. My friend Jenna stood by the window, wine glass in hand, giving me encouraging looks. She was the only one who knew about Mason, the only one who understood that I deserved more excitement than Owen's predictable routine could provide. She'd been urging me to be careful, but also reminding me that life was short, and I had every right to feel alive again. Devon, Owen's college roommate, was telling some story about their fraternity days, his voice carrying across the room. He'd always been loyal to Owen, sometimes annoyingly so, but tonight he seemed relaxed and happy. Everyone did. It was supposed to be a perfect evening. Then Mason appeared in the doorway like a tornado in human form. He was still devastatingly handsome at 34, with that dark hair that always looked perfectly messy and those green eyes that had first caught my attention in high school. We'd dated for 2 years before I met Owen, and when we reconnected last winter at our class reunion, all those old feelings came flooding back. The excitement, the unpredictability, the way he made me feel like the most important person in the world. "Eirene," he called out, his voice too loud, too familiar. "Happy birthday, beautiful." The room went quiet. Owen turned from where he'd been lighting the candles, his face shifting from confusion to something darker. I felt my stomach drop as Mason weaved through the crowd, clearly having started his celebration hours before arriving. "Mason," I said carefully, forcing a smile, "I didn't know you were coming." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," he slurred, reaching for me with arms that smelled like whiskey and cigarettes. "Not when we've been getting so close lately." Lorraine's eyebrows shot up. Gwen appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in hand. Devon stopped, mid-sentence. The entire room was watching now, sensing something electric and dangerous in the air. "Maybe you should sit down," I suggested, trying to guide him toward an empty chair. "Let me get you some coffee." But Mason was beyond reasoning. He'd always been impulsive, reckless when he drank, and tonight, that recklessness was aimed directly at my secret. "Coffee?" He laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "Come on, Eirene. Don't pretend we're just old friends. Not after all those Tuesday afternoons at my place." The words hit the room like a physical blow. I watched Owen's face change, saw the exact moment when confusion became understanding, when understanding became devastation. The lighter slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the dining table. "What's he talking about?" Owen's voice was quiet, controlled, but I could hear the tremor underneath. My mind raced, searching for an explanation, a lie, anything to deflect what was happening. "He's drunk, Owen. He doesn't know what he's saying." "The hell I don't." Mason's voice rose, and I realized with growing horror that he wasn't going to stop. "Tell him, Eirene. Tell your husband about our little Tuesday tradition. Tell him how you've been sneaking over to my apartment every week for the past 8 months. The silence that followed was deafening. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me, waiting for a denial that wouldn't come. Because how could I deny what everyone had just heard? How could I explain away the truth when it was standing right there in my living room, drunk and bitter, and determined to destroy everything I'd worked so hard to maintain? Owen stood frozen by the cake, candles still flickering, his face cycling through emotions I'd never seen before. Hurt, betrayal, disbelief, and finally, something that looked like his heart physically breaking in real time. "Owen," I started, but what could I possibly say? The truth was already out, echoing off the walls of our living room, witnessed by everyone we cared about. Tessa began to cry, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand it. Lorraine stood up slowly, her face a mask of cold fury directed entirely at me. Gwen dropped her dish towel. Devon's mouth hung open in shock. And my mother, my own mother, just stared at me with disappointment written across every line of her face. The birthday candles continued to burn, wax beginning to drip onto the chocolate frosting, while my marriage dissolved in front of a room full of witnesses. The aftermath of Mason's revelation felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. After the guests left in uncomfortable silence, and Owen put Tessa to bed without speaking to me, I found myself alone in our kitchen, staring at the abandoned birthday cake and trying to figure out how to salvage my life. The candles had burned down to nothing, leaving waxy puddles in the frosting. Dirty plates and half-empty wine glasses covered every surface, evidence of a celebration that had turned into a disaster. I started loading the dishwasher mechanically, my hands shaking as I tried to process what had just happened. Owen appeared in the doorway, his face pale and drawn. He'd changed into his old college t-shirt and pajama pants, but his eyes were wide awake and full of questions I wasn't ready to answer. "We need to talk," he said simply. I turned to face him, searching for the right words, the perfect explanation that would make this all go away. "Owen, I can explain everything. Mason was drunk. He was saying things. Were you at his apartment last Tuesday?" His voice was steady, mathematical in its precision. This was Owen in problem-solving mode, breaking down the equation step by step. The lie died in my throat. Because yes, I had been at Mason's apartment last Tuesday, and the Tuesday before that, and every Tuesday for months, telling Owen I was running errands, or meeting friends for lunch. "Answer me, Eirene. Were you there?" "Yes, but it's not what you think." "What am I supposed to think?" For the first time, his voice cracked. "My wife has been disappearing every Tuesday for months, lying about where she's going, and her ex-boyfriend just announced to our entire family that they've been having an affair. What exactly should I think?" The word affair hung between us like a blade. I wanted to deny it, to claim it was just friendship, just nostalgia, but the evidence was too overwhelming. The secret phone calls, the deleted text messages, the way my heart raced every time Mason's name appeared on my screen. "I never meant for this to happen," I said instead. It started innocently. We were just talking, reminiscing about old times. In his apartment, every Tuesday for 8 months. He had the timeline exactly right, which meant he'd been paying more attention than I'd realized. Owen always noticed patterns, details, the small inconsistencies that others missed. It's what made him a good teacher, and, apparently, what made him impossible to fool indefinitely. "You don't understand what it's been like," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "We've been married for 10 years, Owen. 10 years of the same routine, the same conversations, the same everything. I felt like I was disappearing. So you decided to cheat on me instead of talking to me about it." I wasn't cheating. The words came out sharper than I intended. I needed something different, something that made me feel alive again. Owen stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him processing this information, filing it away with all the other evidence he'd apparently been collecting. Did you sleep with him? The question hit me like a physical blow. Because yes, I had slept with Mason, multiple times, in his apartment, in hotel rooms, once in his car after too many drinks at lunch. But admitting that would end everything, would confirm Owen's worst fears and destroy any chance of salvaging our marriage. Owen, please, can we just focus on moving forward, on fixing this? Answer the question. His persistence was maddening. This was exactly why I'd been drawn back to Mason in the first place. Owen's relentless need to analyze everything, to reduce emotions to logical equations. Where was the passion, the spontaneity, the willingness to just let things be messy and complicated? Fine, I snapped. Yes. Are you happy now? Yes, I slept with him. But it didn't mean anything. It was just physical. The words hit Owen like I'd slapped him. He actually stepped backward, gripping the doorframe for support. For a moment I thought he might cry, but instead his face went completely blank. I see, he said quietly. Owen, wait, let me explain. I think you've explained enough. He turned to leave, then stopped. I'll be sleeping in the guest room. We can figure out the rest tomorrow. He walked away, leaving me alone with the ruins of my birthday party and the growing realization that I might have just destroyed the most stable thing in my life. The next morning, I went to work at the insurance office where I'd been an administrative assistant for 5 years. It was mindless work, filing claims, answering phones, scheduling appointments, but it paid well and gave me the flexibility to maintain my Tuesday schedule. I was hoping for normalcy, for a few hours to think clearly about how to handle the situation at home, but the universe had other plans. At 10:30, a delivery truck pulled up outside our building. I watched through the window as a man in a uniform climbed out, carrying an enormous bouquet of red roses. My stomach sank as he walked through our front door and headed straight for my desk. Delivery for Eirene Vellum, he announced cheerfully. Every head in the office turned to stare as he placed the massive arrangement on my desk. The roses were beautiful, clearly expensive, and came with a small white card tucked between the stems. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Sorry about last night. You know I can't stay away from you. M. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mason had sent flowers to my workplace, with a note that anyone could have read, the day after he'd exposed our affair to my entire family. The man had no sense of timing or discretion. My phone buzzed with a text message from Owen. We need to talk tonight. Then another from my mother-in-law, Lorraine. I think you should know that Tessa asked me this morning why Daddy was crying. And finally from Jenna. Girl, what happened after I left? Everyone's talking about it. I stared at the roses, their red petals suddenly looking like drops of blood, and realized that my carefully constructed world wasn't just crumbling, it was collapsing entirely, taking everyone I loved down with it. The worst part was that a small, shameful part of me was thrilled by Mason's gesture. Even as my marriage fell apart, even as my daughter suffered, I couldn't deny the rush of excitement that came from being wanted so desperately. And that realization terrified me more than anything else. The roses sat on my desk like an accusation for the rest of the week. Every time someone walked past, their eyes would linger on the extravagant bouquet, and I could practically hear the gossip spreading through the office. Eirene Vellum, the quiet married woman with the teacher husband, receiving romantic flowers from a mysterious admirer. By Friday, I couldn't stand it anymore, and threw them in the dumpster behind the building. At home, Owen had become a stranger. He spoke to me only when necessary, his responses clipped and professional. He helped Tessa with homework, made dinner, maintained the household routine with mechanical precision, but it was like living with a polite ghost. Tessa sensed the tension immediately. She started having nightmares, crawling into bed with Owen in the guest room instead of coming to me. When I asked her about school, she just shrugged and said everything was fine, but her teacher sent home a note expressing concern about her withdrawn behavior and declining grades. "She's picking up on the stress at home," Owen said when I showed him the note. We were standing in the kitchen after dinner, Tessa upstairs supposedly doing homework, but probably listening to our conversation through the heating vents. "Maybe if you stopped giving me the silent treatment, there would be less stress," I replied, immediately regretting the defensive tone. Owen looked at me with something between pity and disgust. "You think this is about my reaction? Eirene, you had an 8-month affair with your ex-boyfriend. You lied to me every single week. You put our family at risk, our daughter's stability, our marriage. And you're upset that I'm not handling it well. I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or missing an appointment. This was a choice. Hundreds of choices, every Tuesday for 8 months. He was right, and I hated him for it. I hated his calm logic, his ability to see the situation so clearly, while I felt like I was drowning in confusion and regret. This was exactly why I'd been drawn back to Mason. He never made me feel small or analyzed or reduced to a series of poor decisions. "I'm going to stay at my mother's this weekend," Owen continued. "I'm taking Tessa with me. I think we both need some space to figure out what comes next." "You can't take my daughter away from me." "I'm not taking her away. I'm giving us all a chance to breathe," Lorraine offered. And honestly, Tessa could use some stability right now. The mention of his mother made my stomach clench. Lorraine had always been polite to me, but I'd never felt truly accepted by her. She thought Owen could have done better, married someone with more ambition or education or family connections. Now she had proof that her instincts had been right all along. "Fine," I said, trying to sound like I didn't care. "Maybe I could use the space too." But after they left Saturday morning, the house felt enormous and empty. I wandered from room to room, seeing evidence of our life together everywhere. Family photos, Tessa's artwork on the refrigerator, Owen's book stacked neatly on his nightstand. 10 years of marriage, reduced to artifacts in a museum of my own making. By Sunday afternoon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove to Mason's apartment. He lived in a converted warehouse downtown, the kind of trendy loft that looked sophisticated but had thin walls and unreliable heating. I'd spent so many Tuesday afternoons there, feeling sophisticated and rebellious, like I was starring in my own romantic drama instead of living in suburban mediocrity. Mason answered the door in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, his hair still messy from sleep despite it being past 2 o'clock. He looked surprised to see me, but pleased. "Eirene, I wasn't expecting you. We need to talk." He stepped aside to let me in, and I was struck by how different the space felt now. The exposed brick walls and industrial fixtures that had seemed so exciting before now looked cold and unwelcoming. The unmade bed in the corner, where we'd spent so many stolen hours, just looked sordid. "I'm sorry about the other night," Mason said, pouring himself a cup of coffee without offering me one. "I had too much to drink, and when I saw you playing happy family with that husband of yours, I just lost it. You destroyed my marriage." "I destroyed your marriage?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Eirene, you've been lying to him for 8 months. You've been coming here every week, telling me how unhappy you were, how you wished you'd never settled for such a boring life. I didn't destroy anything that wasn't already broken." "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You think I don't know what this is? You want to have your stable suburban life with the reliable husband and the nice house, but you also want the excitement and passion you get with me. You want everything without consequences." His words stung, because they contained enough truth to hurt. I had wanted both lives, the security Owen provided and the thrill Mason offered. I'd convinced myself I could manage both, that I deserved both, that somehow I could make it work indefinitely. "Owen's taking Tessa to his mother's," I said instead of defending myself. Everyone knows now. The whole family, our friends, probably half the neighborhood. So what do you want to do about it? The question hung in the air between us. What did I want? To go back in time and undo Mason's drunken confession? To leave Owen and start over with the man who'd just shattered my life? To somehow convince everyone that this was all a misunderstanding? I don't know, I admitted. Mason sat down on his couch, patting the cushion beside him. Come here. Against my better judgment, I sat down. He put his arm around me, and for a moment, I let myself lean into his familiar warmth. This was what I'd been missing in my marriage, this feeling of being desired, of being worth taking risks for. Maybe this is a good thing, he said softly. Maybe now you can stop pretending and figure out what you really want. What I really want is for none of this to have happened. But it did happen, and now you have to decide who you want to be. I stayed at Mason's apartment until evening, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know where else to go. Going home meant facing the silence and the empty rooms. Going to my mother's meant explaining everything and dealing with her disappointed looks and well-meaning advice. When I finally drove home, there was a car parked across the street with its headlights off. In the darkness, I couldn't tell if anyone was inside, but something about it made me nervous. Had Owen hired someone to watch me? Was he building a case for divorce, collecting evidence of my continued infidelity? I parked in the garage and hurried inside, checking the windows to see if the car was still there. It was gone, but the paranoia remained. How long had Owen been suspicious? What else did he know that he hadn't told me? My phone buzzed with a text from Gwen. Tessa's doing better here. She and Mom made cookies this afternoon. Maybe give them a few more days. The message was kind, but the subtext was clear. My own daughter was happier without me. The family had closed ranks, and I was on the outside. I poured myself a large glass of wine and sat in the living room where everything had started to fall apart just a week ago. The birthday decorations were gone, the furniture back in its usual places, but I could still feel the echo of that terrible moment when my two worlds collided. The worst part was that I missed Mason already. Even knowing he'd destroyed my life, even understanding that he was reckless and selfish and completely wrong for me, I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd made me feel like someone worth fighting for. And that realization scared me more than anything else, because it meant that maybe Owen was right. Maybe this wasn't just a mistake or a moment of weakness. Maybe this was who I really was. Someone who would risk everything for a feeling. Someone who could lie to the people she loved for months without losing sleep. Someone who deserved exactly what was happening to her. The social media post appeared on Tuesday morning, just as I was getting ready for work. It was in the Westfield Moms Facebook group, posted by someone named Jennifer Walsh, whom I vaguely recognized from school events. Ladies, just a heads up about drama at birthday parties. Sometimes you think you know people, but then their ex-boyfriends show up drunk and announce affairs in front of everyone, including children. Maybe keep your personal business private. Some of us don't need that kind of entertainment at family gatherings. She hadn't mentioned my name, but the details were specific enough that anyone who'd been at the party would know exactly who she was talking about. Within an hour, the post had 37 comments and twice as many reactions. I scrolled through them with growing horror. OMG, I heard about this. So awkward. Wait, who are we talking about? I need details. Poor husband. And that little girl was right there. Some people have no shame. This is why I don't invite certain neighbors to things anymore. I slammed my laptop shut and called in sick to work. There was no way I could face my coworkers today, not when half of them probably belonged to the same Facebook groups and neighborhood forums where my personal life was being dissected by strangers. My phone rang. It was my mother. Eirene, honey, I just got off the phone with Mrs. Patterson from down the street. She said people are talking about you online. What's going on? It's nothing, Mom, just gossip. It doesn't sound like nothing. She said something about Owen and a birthday party and... She paused, and I could hear her choosing her words carefully. And another man. I closed my eyes, trying to figure out how much to tell her. My mother had always been my biggest supporter, always ready to defend me against criticism or blame others for my problems. But this was different. This was too big to spin or minimize. Owen and I are having some problems, I said finally. What kind of problems? The kind where I might have made some very bad choices. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Oh, Eirene, what did you do?" The disappointment in her voice broke something inside me. I started crying, ugly sobs that I couldn't control, and told her everything. About Mason, about the Tuesday meetings, about the affair that had been going on for 8 months, about the birthday party disaster, and Owen sleeping in the guest room, and Tessa staying at Lorraine's house. "Honey," my mother said when I finished. "Honey, how did you let it get this far?" "I don't know, it just happened. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was in too deep to get out." "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know that either. Owen won't talk to me. His family hates me. People are posting about me online. I think I've lost everything." "You haven't lost everything. You still have your daughter, and you still have your marriage if you're willing to fight for it." But even as she said it, I could hear the doubt in her voice. Because how do you fight for something when you're the one who destroyed it? How do you ask for forgiveness when you're not even sure you deserve it? After we hung up, I spent the rest of the day in my pajamas, obsessively checking social media and torturing myself with the comments and speculation. Someone had identified me by name in a private message thread that got screenshot and shared. Another person claimed they'd seen me at restaurants with some guy over the past few months and had wondered what was going on. The worst part was how quickly I'd become the villain in everyone else's story. Owen was the poor, betrayed husband. Tessa was the innocent child caught in the middle. Even Mason was getting some sympathy as the other man who'd been manipulated by a married woman looking for excitement. But I was just the cheating wife, the selfish mother, the woman who'd thrown away a good marriage for a cheap thrill. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw the posts online. Calm as a bitch, isn't it?" Then another. "Your poor husband deserves better." And another. "Hope it was worth it." I turned off my phone and hid under the covers, but I couldn't escape the feeling that the entire world was watching me, judging me, finding me guilty of crimes I couldn't deny. Wednesday morning, I forced myself to go to work. I needed the normalcy, the distraction, the pretense that my life wasn't completely falling apart. But the moment I walked into the office, I could feel the change in atmosphere. Conversation stopped when I entered rooms. People who usually chatted with me at the coffee machine suddenly had urgent business elsewhere. My supervisor, Janet, called me into her office before lunch. "Eirene, I need to talk to you about something sensitive." She closed the door and gestured for me to sit down. Janet was in her 50s, divorced herself, and had always been understanding about personal issues, but today her expression was carefully neutral. "I've been getting some calls," she said, "and some emails about your personal situation." My stomach dropped. "What kind of calls?" "People saying they don't feel comfortable working with someone who, well, someone with questionable moral character. I know it's not fair, and technically your personal life is none of our business, but this is a small community. Our clients talk to each other." "Are you firing me?" "No, but I am asking you to consider taking some personal time. Let things cool down. Give people a chance to move on to the next piece of gossip." I wanted to argue, to point out that my job performance had nothing to do with my marriage problems, but I could see the determination in her eyes. This wasn't a request. "How much time?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. We'll call it family leave. Paid, of course. It was a kindness disguised as a punishment, and we both knew it. I was being exiled until the scandal died down, until people found something else to whisper about in grocery store checkout lines and school pickup circles. I cleaned out my desk in silence. aware that every eye in the office was on me. The roses from Mason were long gone, but their ghost lingered in the awkward way my co-workers avoided looking at my workspace. As I carried my box of personal items to my car, I saw Owen's friend Devon pumping gas at the station across the street. He looked up, saw me, and deliberately turned away. Another bridge burned, another relationship destroyed by the fallout from my choices. That evening, I drove past the elementary school where Owen worked. His car was still in the parking lot at 6:30, which meant he was staying late to avoid coming home. Or maybe he was staying late because he didn't consider it home anymore. I wondered if his co-workers were treating him differently too, if people whispered in the faculty lounge about his cheating wife and whether he'd known what was going on, if parents looked at him with pity during conferences, wondering how a man could be so oblivious to his own wife's betrayal. The thought made me feel sick. Owen didn't deserve any of this. He'd been a good husband, a devoted father, a steady presence in our chaotic world. His only crime had been being predictable, reliable, maybe a little boring, and I'd punished him for it by seeking excitement in another man's bed. When I got home, there was a message on the answering machine from Tessa's school counselor, asking for a meeting to discuss her adjustment issues. Another consequence I hadn't considered: how my actions would follow my daughter into her classroom, her friendships, her sense of security in the world. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the dark living room, thinking about the Facebook post that had started this latest wave of humiliation. The woman who'd written it was right about one thing. I should have kept my personal business private, but it was too late for that now. My personal business was public property, dissected and discussed by people who barely knew me, reduced to a cautionary tale about the dangers of infidelity and the importance of family values. And the worst part was that I had no one to blame but myself. I should have known Owen was building a case when I found his laptop open on the kitchen counter Thursday morning. He'd always been meticulous about closing programs and shutting down properly. It was part of his careful, methodical nature. But there it was, displaying a folder labeled Documentation with dozens of files inside. My hands shook as I clicked through them, screenshots of text messages I thought I'd deleted, bank statements highlighting cash withdrawals I'd made for hotel rooms and lunches with Mason, credit card receipts from restaurants across town, places Owen and I never went together. Even my work schedule, with my sick days and personal time, carefully highlighted in yellow. There were photos too, pictures of my car parked outside Mason's building, time-stamped and dated, pictures of us walking together downtown, taken from a distance but clearly identifiable. Owen had been following me, or hiring someone to follow me, documenting my movements with the same precision he brought to grading math tests. At the bottom of the folder was a document titled Custody Considerations that made my blood run cold. It outlined Tessa's declining grades, her behavioral changes, the school counselor's concerns about instability at home. It mentioned my recent administrative leave from work and the social media attention surrounding our family. Owen was preparing for war, and he'd been doing it quietly, methodically, while I'd been focused on damage control and public relations. I closed the laptop and backed away from it like it might explode. This wasn't just about our marriage anymore. This was about custody, about who would get to raise our daughter, about whether I'd be relegated to supervised visits and weekend phone calls. My phone rang. It was Gwen. "Eirene, I wanted to give you a heads up. Owen's asked me to write a statement for his lawyer." "His lawyer?" My voice came out as a croak. "He filed for divorce yesterday." "I'm sorry, I thought you knew." I sank into a kitchen chair, trying to process this information. Divorce papers, a lawyer, statements from family members. This was really happening. "What kind of statement?" Gwen sighed. "About Tessa's well-being, about what I've observed over the past few months. about the party last week and everything else. And what have you observed? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Honestly, I've observed a little girl who's been asking a lot of questions about why Mommy's always busy on Tuesdays and why Daddy seems sad all the time. I've observed a marriage that's been falling apart for months, while one person pretended everything was fine. Her words hit like physical blows. Gwen had always been the peacemaker, the one who tried to see everyone's side and find middle ground. If she was willing to testify against me, then I'd truly lost the battle for hearts and minds. She's my daughter too, I said weakly. I know, and that's why this is so hard. But Eirene, you have to understand, Owen's not trying to hurt you. He's trying to protect Tessa, and right now, she needs stability more than anything else. After she hung up, I sat in the kitchen staring at Owen's laptop, trying to figure out my next move. I could delete the files, claim they were fabricated, hire my own lawyer, and fight back with everything I had. But what would I be fighting for? A marriage I'd already destroyed? A reputation that was in ruins? The right to disrupt my daughter's life even further? The front door opened, and Owen walked in carrying a manila envelope. He looked tired, older than his 35 years, but there was something different about him too. A sense of purpose, of determination I hadn't seen before. I see you found my research, he said, nodding toward the laptop. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself, and our daughter. He set the envelope on the counter between us. These are for you. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside, but I did anyway. Divorce papers, custody filings, a request for temporary separation of assets. All filed in the family court, all legally binding, all proof that my husband had moved from hurt and confusion to cold, calculated action. Owen, please, can't we talk about this? Can't we try counseling or... Counseling? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Eirene, you had an affair for 8 months. You lied to me every single week. You brought our daughter to birthday parties with the same people you've been deceiving. You put our family at risk, our finances, our reputation, our child's emotional well-being. What exactly would we talk about in counseling? How to fix this? How to move forward? There is no moving forward, not together. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, his expression serious but not unkind. I've talked to a lawyer, obviously. I've talked to a therapist. I've talked to my family and friends and even your mother. Everyone agrees that the best thing for Tessa right now is stability and consistency. I can provide that. Can you? You're on administrative leave from your job. You're the subject of gossip all over town. You're still in contact with Mason. Yes, I know about Sunday afternoon. And you've shown no real understanding of the damage you've caused. I understand. Do you? Because when I tried to talk to you about this last week, you blamed me for being boring. You said you felt like you were disappearing, like you deserved more excitement. You never once said you were sorry for what you'd done to our family. He was right, and we both knew it. I'd been so focused on justifying my actions, on explaining why I'd been driven to seek comfort elsewhere, that I'd never actually apologized for the betrayal itself. I'm sorry, I said now, but the words felt hollow even to me. I know you are, but sorry doesn't undo 8 months of lies. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that our daughter heard her mother's affair announced at a birthday party. Sorry doesn't fix the trust that's been broken or the reputation that's been destroyed. So that's it. 10 years of marriage, and you're just giving up. I'm not giving up. I'm accepting reality. This marriage has been over for months, Eirene. I was just too naive to see it. He stood to leave, then turned back. I'm not trying to keep Tessa away from you permanently, but right now she needs consistency. She needs to feel safe and secure. And honestly, I don't think you can provide that until you figure out who you want to be. Where is she? Still at my mother's. She's doing better there, sleeping through the night, eating properly, focusing on her schoolwork. She asks about you, but she's not crying herself to sleep anymore. The implication was clear. Our daughter was better off without me. The most important person in my world was thriving in my absence, which meant that maybe I wasn't as essential as I'd believed. After Owen left, I opened a bottle of wine and called Mason. I needed someone on my side, someone who would tell me that Owen was being unreasonable, that I wasn't the monster everyone seemed to think I was. He filed for divorce, I said when Mason answered. I heard. Devon called me. Devon called you? This was news to me. Owen's best friend was talking to my affair partner. He wanted to make sure I understood that if I came near you or your family again, there would be consequences. Legal consequences. What kind of consequences? The kind where your husband's lawyer paints me as a predator who pursued a vulnerable married woman. The kind where I lose my job and my reputation, along with everything else. I could hear the fear in Mason's voice, and it scared me. If he was backing away now, when I needed support most, then I truly was alone in this. So that's it. You're abandoning me too. I'm not abandoning you, but I'm also not stupid. Your husband has documentation going back months. He has witnesses, evidence, a paper trail that makes both of us look terrible. Fighting him would be like bringing a knife to a nuclear war. I thought you cared about me. I do care about you, but I also care about my own life, and right now, the best thing I can do for both of us is disappear. He hung up, leaving me alone with my wine and my regrets and the growing realization that I'd managed to lose everything that mattered in the span of 2 weeks. The divorce papers sat on the counter like an accusation, legal language that reduced 10 years of marriage to asset division and custody schedules. Owen had been thorough, fair even, but inflexible. He wanted the house, primary custody of Tessa, and a clean break from the woman who'd betrayed his trust. And looking at the evidence he'd compiled, the case he'd built with mathematical precision, I couldn't argue that he was wrong. Family court was beige walls and fluorescent hum, and I sat beside Patricia Chen, coached to show remorse and never get defensive. Across the hall, Owen had a sharper lawyer, plus Lorraine and Gwen at his sides. Judge Maria Santos called it one of the most documented cases she'd seen. Owen's attorney laid out receipts, texts, timelines, and school records showing Tessa's decline. Lorraine testified Tessa slept and studied better in her care. Gwen described my constant Tuesday absences. On the stand, Owen stayed calm, focused on stability. I admitted the affair and promised counselling. Cross-exam stripped my excuses. The ruling, Owen primary custody, my visit supervised.